The history of Baybay Grace Baptist Church, 215 R. Magsaysay Avenue, Baybay City. Baybay Leyte was a great potential for church planting. That was the finding of assessment survey conducted by the representatives of the Association of Baptists for World Evangelism or ABWE. Thus, in September 1983, an American missionary couple named Reverend Philip and Barbara Clamp with their son Andy arrived in Baybay. They rented the house of Captain and Mrs. Odo Rubin, located at G.H. Del Pilar Street. Later on, Pastor Arlindo Rosalada and a Bible woman, Miss Eufemia Mijares, joined the work. On September 25, 1983, the first church service was done at the garage of Captain and Mrs. Odo Rubin, where the Clamps were staying. The following Sunday, two more visitors attended the service, Mr. Filipino Peña and Miss Elsa Palermo, making a total of 8 adult attendees. During second Sunday service, the first Sunday school for children was held in the terrace of the said house. It was also in this garage and terrace where the daily vacation Bible school classes were held during summer of 1984. On February 13, 1984, the first baptismal service was held in Dongkaan River, officiated by Reverend Clamp. The newly baptized Christians were Mr. Filipino Peña and Miss Elsa Palermo. In 1987, 4 years after the first service, the group increased in number. They decided to rent the lower portion of Engineer Jaime Bandalan's house at A. Mabini Street. This place was also used to house Pastor Arlindo Rosalada. During this time, all levels of Sunday school classes were already opened. God continued to bless the work and the membership grew. Hence, there was a need to move to a new and bigger venue. This time, an abandoned ice plant building owned by Tang family was rented. The team continued relentlessly in conducting Bible studies, witnessing, visitation and following up the contacts, and organizing children's centers in different locations in Baybay. An evangelistic campaign was also held at the old auditorium of Baybay with Pastor Pacifico Dango as the invited evangelist. In 1987, they decided to call an intern pastor from Doan Baptist Seminary in Iloilo City in the person of Pastor Ruben Hinilia. In 1987, Pastor Rosalada resigned, so Pastor Hinilia was called as youth pastor. A good church does not only cater to the spiritual needs of the members, but also to their other needs. Thus, the first couple to be wed was Edwin Burinaga and Rosalita Sumbilon. The first funeral service was that of Mr. Sotero Sumbilon. The first child dedication was that of Agnes, the daughter of Emil and Nenita Angob. These weddings, funerals, and child dedication services were held in the Tang's ice plant at A. Mabini Street. Due to the increasing membership, the group felt that there was a need to move to a bigger and permanent venue. To seek wisdom and guidance, they held a half-day fasting and prayer at Visca Beach. To augment the meager resources accumulated through tithes, offering, and pledges, the church applied for a loan from the Association of Baptists for World Evangelism, or ABWE, to buy the much-needed lot. With God's leading and with the help of Mr. Domingo Torres, the church was able to buy the house and lot owned by Mr. Sievert in R. Magsaysay Avenue. For some time, Sunday services and other ministries were held in the ground floor of the house, while the second floor serves as a parsonage. On February 12, 1989, the church was able to hold the groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of a permanent church building officiated by Dr. Ebersol in Abwe Missionary. The new church building was finished and was dedicated on February 10, 1990, with the presence of Dr. Wendell Campton, the Abway president. Before the new church building could be finished, Pastor Henilia got married to Meredith Sumbilon. The first wedding ceremony held in the house of Mr. Siebert, which is now the kindergarten. Today, this old house serves as the parsonage for workers and classrooms for the school. Church workers come and go. This time, Pastor Henilia resigned in the year 1989. He worked in BGBC from 1987 to 1989. Pastor Ronnie Edelin, an intern pastor from Doan's Seminary, took place to lead the youth. He worked in Baybay from 1989 to 1990. Following the church building completion, the financial support from ABE for the Filipino worker of BGBC was also cut off except for Ms. Mijares. The local church assumed the responsibility. It was in 1990 that the Clumps left the Grace Baptist Church for good to start another mission work in Cebu City. Before they left, Pastor Bertram Ecate was called to be the full-time pastor of the church with Pastor Edwin Badana, a student of Leyte Baptist Seminary, as a weekend student worker. In 1990, Pastor Bertram and Lily Ecate started a kindergarten school. Today, the Grace Christian School has a complete preschool and an elementary level. The church also produced pastors and Bible women, namely Pastor Ricardo Peña and Pastor Joel Peña, Mrs. Violeta Sumbilon Sevilla, Mrs. Yolanda Mundal Salada, and Miss Melanie Helongos. In 1991, Miss Mijares retired as a full-time Bible woman of BGBC. Miss Violeta Sumbilon took her place. Miss Mijares, however, was still actively helping in the work until she transferred for good to Cagayan de Oro City in October 1997. In 2006, Miss Violeta Sumbilon Sevilla became a kindergarten teacher from 1997 to 2006. The church had no Bible woman since Mrs. Violeta Sevilla left. Pastor Ecate resigned in August 1996, so Pastor Badana, the associate pastor then, was called to take over as full-time pastor of the church. He was joined later by Pastor Elijah Rapada to act as the associate pastor until he resigned in 2004. Pastor Elijah with his family is now in Papua New Guinea. In June 1999, the church decided to open a mission work in the municipality of Mahaplag with Pastor Fanuel Salada as the GBC missionary pastor. Today, the church in Mahaplag has their own lot and building that serve as their parsonage and place of worship. They also opened a kindergarten school just a few months after their first church service. On July 2006, Grace Baptist Mission of Mahaplag was declared independent. That same year, Pastor Salada resigned, being a BGBC missionary pastor. For 6 years, the Mahaplag Church had no permanent worker. In 2011, Grace Baptist Church of Mahaplag decided to come under the Mother Church again. Today, Pastor Marlon Avergonzado is serving as a missionary pastor of Mahaplag with his wife Ruth and son Zimran. Year 2004, Pastor Glyn Heneran was called as an interim pastor for 1 year as replacement of Pastor Elijah Rapada. However, after a year, he was called as a full-time associate pastor of BGBC. In 2007, Pastor Glyn got married to one of GCS teachers. In 2008, he was lead to work to another place. The church is very blessed to have members who are committed to spread the gospel in Baybay. In 2003, Mrs. Rebecca Borneo was an instrument in establishing another mission work in Barangay Cabalasan, Baybay. Their first weekend pastor, and later called to be the missionary pastor, was Pastor Julius Daginutan. On their second year, the group of Christians in Cabalasan was able to put up a temporary place of worship. Year later, Grace Baptist Church Baybay bought a new lot where the church building now standing. During the time of Pastor Julius, Kabbalas Mission Outreach has produced young people to dedicate their lives to the Lord as pastor and Bible women, namely Crispina Garciano, Josie Garciano, and Nancy Oracion. Pastor Julius resigned from the work in 2008. In June 2013, Pastor Alfred Argalion, with his wife Ruela, accepted the call to work in Cabalasan while Mrs. Argalion is teaching in GCS. Way back on September 1, 2006, Pastor Benjamin Bugos started to work in BGBC as music director and school librarian. In February 2007, another mission work in Almeria, Biliran started with a missionary pastor Gary Hineran. He was later joined by Pastor R.D. Olohan. Pastor Gary Hineran resigned in 2010. Pastor R.D. Olohan still works in Almeria with his wife and two sons today. On the same year, July 2007, GBC was fully paid the loan in Abwe Fund. A turnover ceremony of the documents was done by Reverend Philip Clump during worship service. In the early part of 2008, Marikina Baptist Church partnered with Baybay Grace Baptist Church to send and support Pastor and Mrs. Rudy Olohan as missionary to Kawayan, province of Biliran, a 10-minute ride from Armeria, Biliran. In 2010, Pastor Rudy Olohan resigned and decided to go back to their hometown because of his wife's health condition. March 2009, Pastor Edwin Badana with his family resigned from the church. He worked from year 1990 to 2009 as senior pastor and a school administrator, starting as a weekend student worker to becoming the senior pastor. May 15, 2009, Pastor Rolando Magallanes and his family accepted the call of the church to be the senior pastor. The following year, 2011, Pastor Geoffrey Llanera was called to be an assistant pastor. Before that, Pastor Llanera was an intern pastor of the church. This year, the church have three seminary students: Raymart Pintuan, a second-year student; Jordan Castillo, a first-year student; and Lovely May Arsenas is now serving as intern student in Limasawa Island. The Lord has blessed the church in different ways. Several baptisms happened every year. Parents of our school joined the church, and transferees from other places helped the numerical growth of Baybay Grace Baptist Church. The church had problems and trials, but God has allowed them for a purpose. Today, Baybay Grace Baptist Church is celebrating her 30th year of existence in Baybay City. It stands as a living testimony of God's faithfulness, goodness, and mercy. To Him belong all honor, glory, and praises.